where it had gone or how.
I'm a gleeman, not a newsmonger. And I make a point of never knowing anything about Aes Sedai. Much safer that way.
But the war, Matt began eagerly, only to be cut off by Master Merlin.
In wars, boy, fools kill other fools for foolish causes. That's enough for anyone to know. I am here for my art.
Suddenly, he thrust a finger at Rand.
You, lad. You're a tall one. Not with your full growth on you yet, but I doubt there's another man in the district with your height. Not many in the village with eyes that color either, I'll wager. The point is, you're an axe handle across the shoulders and as tall as an Aiel man. What's your name, lad?
Rand gave it hesitantly,
I can do
not
this.
sure whether or not the man was making fun of him. But the Gleeman had already turned his attention to Perrin.
And you have almost the size of an oak tree. Close enough. How are you called?
Not unless I stand on my own shoulders, Perrin laughed. I'm afraid Rand and I are just ordinary folk, Master Merlin. Not made-up creatures from your stories. I'm Perrin Aybara. Tom Merlin tugged at one of his mustaches.
Well now, made-up creatures from my stories. Is that what they are? Lads are widely traveled, then, it seems.
Rand kept his mouth shut, certainly were the butt of a joke now, but Perrin spoke up. We've all been as far as Watch Hill and Down Rhine. Not many around here have gone as far. He was not boasting. Perrin seldom did. He was just telling the truth. We've all seen the mine, too. And he did sound boastful. That's the swamp at the far end of the Waterwood. Nobody at all goes there. It's full of quicksands and bogs. Except us. And nobody goes to the Mountains of Mist either. But we did once. To the foot of them, anyway.
As far as that?
The Gleeman murmured, brushing at his mustaches now continually. Rand thought he was hiding a smile, and he saw that Perrin was frowning. It's bad luck to enter the mountains, Matt said, as if he had to defend himself for not going further. Everybody knows that. That's just foolishness, Matrim Coffin, Egwene cut in angrily. Nynaeve says... She broke off, her cheeks turning faint, and the look she gave to Tom Merlin was not as friendly as it had been. It is not right to make... It isn't... Her face was redder, and she fell silent. Matt blinked, as if he was just getting a suspicion of what had been going on.
You're right, child.
Said quietly.
I apologize humbly. I am here to entertain. My tongue has always got me into trouble.
Maybe we haven't traveled as far as you, Perrin said flatly. But what does how tall Rand is have to do with anything?
Just this, lad. A little later I will let you try to pick me up, but you won't be able to lift my feet from the ground. Not you, nor your tall friend there, Rand, is it? Nor any other man. Now what do you think of that?
Perrin snorted a laugh. I think I can lift you right now. But when he stepped forward, Tom Merlin motioned him back.
Later, man, later. But there are more folk to watch. An artist needs an audience.
A score of folk had gathered on the green since the Gleeman appeared from the inn, young men and women down to children who peeked wide-eyed and silent from behind the older onlookers. All looked as if they were waiting for miraculous things from the Gleeman. The white-haired man looked them over. He appeared to be counting them, then gave a slight shake of his head and sighed.
I suppose I'd better give you a small sample, so you can run tell the others, eh? Just a taste of what you'll see tomorrow at your festival.
He took a step back and suddenly leaped into the
Just
air,
block
twisting
out
and
everything
somersaulting
else.
to land facing them atop the old stone foundation. More than that, 3 balls, red, white, and black, began dancing between his hands even as he landed. A soft sound came from the watchers, half astonishment, half satisfaction. Even Rand forgot his irritation. He flashed Egwene a grin and got a delighted one in return. Then both turned to stare unabashedly at the Gleeman.
You want stories? Tom Merlin declared. I have stories and I'll give them to you. I'll make them come alive before your eyes.
A blue ball joined the others from somewhere, then a green one and a yellow.
Tales of great wars and great heroes for the men and boys. For the women and girls, the entire Abtaragine cycle. Tales of Arthur Pendrag, Tonriol, Arthur Hawkwing, Arthur the High King, who once ruled all the lands from the Aiel Wastes to the Arith Ocean, and even beyond. Wondrous stories of strange people and strange lands, of the Green Man, of Mordor and Trollocs, of Ogier and Aiel, the 1,000 tales of Anna, the wise counselor, Jane, the giant slayer, how Sirta tamed Jain Farsight, Mara, and the 3 foolish kings.
Tell us about Len, Egwene called. How he flew to the moon in the belly of an eagle made of fire. Tell about his daughter, Salya, walking among the stars. Rand looked at her out of the corner of his eye, but she seemed intent on the gleam. She had never liked stories about adventures and long journeys. Her favorites were always the funny ones, or stories about women outwitting people who were supposed to be smarter than everyone else. He was sure she had asked for tales about Len and Salya to put a burr under his shirt. Surely she could see the world outside was no place for Two Rivers folk. Listening to tales of adventures, even dreaming about them was one thing. Having them take place around you would be something else again.
Old stories, those,
Tom Merrilin said, and abruptly he was juggling 3 colored balls with each hand.
Stories from the age before the age of legends, some say. Perhaps even older. But I have old stories, mind you now, of ages that were and will be. Ages when men ruled the heavens and the stars. And ages when man roamed as brother to the animals. Ages of wonder and ages of horror. Ages ended by fire raining from the sky, and ages doomed by snow and ice covering land and sea. I have old stories, and I will tell old stories. Tales of Mosk the Giant with his lance of fire that could reach around the world, and his wars with Alsbet, the queen of all. Tales of Mutaris, the healer, mother of the wondrous Ind.
The balls now danced between Tom's hands in 2 intertwining circles. His voice was almost a chant. He turned slowly as he spoke, as if surveying the onlookers to gauge his effect.
I will tell you of the end of the Age of Legends, of the dragon.
We can't just rush into this.
To free the Dark One into the world of men. I will tell of the time of madness, when Eyes to Die shattered the world. Of the Trolloc Wars, when men battled Trollocs for rule of the earth. Of the War of the 100 Years, when men battled men, and the nations of our day were wrought. I will tell the adventures of men and women, rich and poor, great and small, proud and humble. The siege of the pillars of the sky. How Goodwife Carol cured her husband of snoring. How Dorrit and the fall of the house of...
Abruptly, the flow of words and the juggling alike stopped. Tom simply snatched the balls from the air and stopped talking. Unnoticed by Rand, Moraine had joined the listeners. Lan was at her shoulder, though he had to look twice to see the man. For a moment, Tom looked at Moraine sideways, his face and body still except for making the balls disappear into his capacious coat sleeves. Then he bowed to her, holding his cloak wide.
Your pardon, but you are surely not from this district.
Lady, Eowyn hissed fiercely. The Lady Moraine. Tom blinked, then bowed again, more deeply.
Your pardon again. Pity? I meant no disrespect.
Moraine made a small waving away gesture.
None was perceived, Master Bard,
and my name is simply Moraine. I am indeed a stranger here, a traveler like yourself. Far from home and alone. The world can be a dangerous place when one is a stranger. The Lady Moraine collects stories, Eowyn put in. Stories about things that happen in the Two Rivers. Though I don't know whatever happened here to make a story out.
I trust you will like my stories as well.
Tom watched her with obvious wariness. He looked not best pleased to find her there. Suddenly Rand wondered what sort of entertainment a lady like her might be offered in a city like Baerlon or Caemlyn. Surely it could not be anything better than a Greenland. That is a matter of taste, Master Bard, Moraine replied. Some stories I like, and some I do not. Tom's bow was his deepest yet, bending his long body parallel to the ground.
I assure you, none of my stories will displease. All will please and entertain. And you do me too much honor. I am a simple gleeman. That, and nothing more.
Moraine answered his bow with a gracious nod. For an instant, she seemed even more the Lady Eowyn had named her, accepting an offering from one of her subjects. Then she turned away, and Lan followed, a wolf healing a gliding swan. Tom stared after them, bushy brows drawn down, stroking his long mustaches with a knuckle, until they were halfway up the green. He's not pleased at all, Rand thought. Are you going to juggle some more now? Eowyn demanded. Eat fire, Matt shouted. I want to see you eat fire. The harp, a voice cried from the crowd. Play the harp. someone else called for the flute. At that moment, the door of the inn opened, and the village council trundled out, Nynaeve in their midst. Adon Fane was not with
It's
them,
all or
Rand
nothing.
saw. Apparently, the peddler had decided to remain in the warm common room with his mulled wine. Muttering about strong friend, eh? Tom Marilyn abruptly jumped down from the old foundation. He ignored the cries of those who had been watching him, pressing inside past the councilors before they were well out of the doorway. Is he supposed to be a gleeman or a king? Sen Bowie asked in annoyed tones. A waste of good money, if you ask me. Bran al'Vir half turned after the gleeman, then shook his head. That man may be more trouble than he's worth. Nynaeve, busy gathering her cloak around her, sniffed loudly. Worry about the gleeman if you want, Brandolwyn al'Vir. At least he is in Emond's Field, which is more than you can say for this false dragon. But as long as you are worrying, there are others here who should excite your worry. If you please, Wisdom, Bran said stiffly, kindly leave who should worry me to my deciding. Mistress Moraine and Master Lan are guests in my inn, and decent, respectable folk, so I say. Neither of them has called me a fool in front of the whole council. Neither of them has told the council it hasn't a full set of wits among them. It seems my estimate was too high by half, Nynaeve retorted. She strode away without a backward glance, leaving Bran's jaw working as he searched for a reply. Egwene looked at Rand as if she were going to speak, then darted after the Wisdom instead. Rand knew there must be some way to stop her from leaving the Two Rivers, but the only way he could think of was not one he was prepared to take, even if she was willing. And she had as much said she was not willing at all, which made him feel even worse. That young woman wants a husband, Sen Bowie growled, bouncing on his toes. His face was purple and getting darker. She lacks proper respect. We're the village council, not boys raking her yard, and... The mayor breathed heavily through his nose and suddenly rounded on the old thatcher. Be quiet, Sen. Stop acting like a black-veiled Aiel. The skinny man froze in his toes in astonishment. The mayor never let his temper get the best of him. Bran glared. Burn me, but we have better things to be about than this foolishness. Or do you intend to prove Nynaeve right? With that, he stumped back into the inn and slammed the door behind him. The council members glanced at Sen, then moved off in their separate directions. All but Harald Luhan, who accompanied the stony-visaged Thatcher, talking quietly. The blacksmith was the only one who could ever get Sen to see reason. Rand went to meet his father, and his friends trailed after him. I've never seen Master al'Vir so mad, was the first thing Rand said, getting him a disgusted look from Mat. The mayor and the Wisdom seldom agree, Tam said, and they agree less than usual today, that's all. It's the same in every village. What about the false dragon? Mat asked, and Perrin added eager murmurs. What about the Aes Sedai? Tam shook his head slowly. Master Fane knew little more than he had already told, at least little of interest to us. Battles won or lost, cities taken and retaken. All in Gil'Adan, thank the light. It hasn't spread, or had not the last Master Fane knew. Battles interest me, Mat said, and Perrin added, what did he say about them? Battles don't interest me, Matrim, Tam said. But I'm sure he will be glad to tell you all about them later. What does interest me is that we shouldn't have to worry about them here, as far as the council can tell. We can see no reason for Aes Sedai to come here on their way south. As for the return journey, they aren't likely to want to cross the Forest of Shadows and swim the White River. Rand and the others chuckled at the idea. There were 3 reasons why no one came into the Two Rivers except from the north, by the way of Tarn Ferry. The Mountains of Mist in the west were the first, of course, and the mire blocked the east just as effectively. To the south was the White River, which got its name from the way rocks and boulders churned its swift waters to froth. And beyond the White lay the Forest of Shadows. Few Two Rivers folk had ever crossed the White, and fewer still returned if they did. It was generally agreed, though, that the Forest of Shadows stretched south for 100 miles or more, without a road or a village, but with plenty of wolves and bears. So that's an end to it for us, Mat said. He sounded at least a little disappointed. Not quite, Tam said. Day after tomorrow we will send men to Devon Ride and Watch Hill and Tarn Ferry, too, to arrange for a watch to be kept. Riders along the White and the Tarn bows, and patrols between. It should be done today, but only the mayor agrees with me.
The rest can't see asking anyone to spend Beltane off riding across the two rivers. But I thought you said we didn't have to worry, Perrin said. Tam shook his head. I said should not, boy, not did not. I've seen men die because they were sure that what should not happen would not. Besides, the fighting will stir up all sorts. Most of them are trying to find safety, but others will be looking for a way to profit from the confusion. We'll offer any of the first a helping hand, but we must be ready to send the second type on their way. Abruptly, Matt spoke up. Can we be part of it?
No problem.
I want to anyway. You know I can ride as well as anyone in the village. You want a few weeks of cold, boredom, and sleeping rough? Tam chuckled. Likely that's all there will be to it. I hope that's all. Well, we're out of the way even for refugees. But you can speak to Master Alvear if your mind is made up. Rand, it's time for us to be getting back to the farm. Rand blinked in surprise. I thought we were staying for winter night. Things need seeing to at the farm, and I need you with
Just
me.
block out everything else.
Even so, we don't have to leave for hours yet. And I want to volunteer for the patrols too. We're going now, his father replied in a tone that brooked no argument. In a softer voice he added, we'll be back tomorrow with plenty of time for you to speak to the mayor. And plenty of time for festival too. 5 minutes now, then meet me in the stable. Are you going to join Rand and me on the watch? Matt asked Perrin and Tam laughed. I'll bet there's nothing like this ever happened in the Two Rivers before. Why? If we get up to the Tarn, we might even see soldiers, or who knows
Just
what.
another battle.
Even Tinkers. I expect I will, Perrin said slowly. If Master Luhan doesn't need me, that is. The war is in Gillidan, Rand snapped. With an effort, he lowered his voice. The war is in Gillidan. And the Aes Sedai are the light known where, but none of it is here. The man in the black cloak is. Or have you forgotten him already? The others exchanged embarrassed looks. Sorry, Rand, Matt muttered. But a chance to do something besides milk my Da's cows doesn't come along very often. He straightened under their startled stares. Well, I do milk them every day, too. The Black Rider, Rand reminded them. What if he hurts somebody? Maybe he's a refugee from the war, Perrin said doubtfully. Whatever he is, Matt said, the Watch will find him. Maybe, Rand said, but he seems to disappear when he wants to. It might be better if they knew to look for him. We'll tell Master Alvear when we volunteer for the patrols, Matt said, and he'll tell the Council, and they'll tell the Watch. The Council, Perrin said incredulously. We'd be lucky if the mayor didn't laugh out loud. Master and Rand's father already think the two of us are jumping at shadows. Rand sighed. If we're going to do it, we might as well do it now. He won't laugh any louder today than he will tomorrow. Maybe, Perrin said with a sidelong glance at Matt, we should try finding some others who've seen him. We'll see just about everybody in the village tonight. Matt's scowl deepened, but he still did not say anything. All of them understood that Perrin meant they should find witnesses who were more reliable than Matt. He won't laugh any louder tomorrow, Perrin added when Rand hesitated. And I'd just as soon have somebody else with us when we go to him. Half the village would suit me fine. Rand nodded slowly. He could already hear Master Alvear laughing. More witnesses certainly could not hurt. If 3 of them had seen the fellow, they had to have 2. They must have. Tomorrow then. You two find whoever you can tonight, and tomorrow we go to the mayor. After that... They looked at him silently, no one raising the question of what happened if they could not find anyone else who had seen the black-cloaked man. The question was clear in their eyes, though, and he had no answer. He sighed heavily. I'd better go now. My father will be wondering if I fell into a hole.
What is it?
Followed by their
We need to
goodbyes,
hide.
he trotted around to the stable yard where the high-wheeled cart stood propped on its shafts. It was a long, narrow building, topped by a high, thatched roof. Stalls,
They don't seem like they're
floors
even
covered
looking
with
for
straw,
us.
filled
I mean,
both
we're
sides of the dim
we're on the
interior,
loose.
lit only by the open double doors at either end.
Psycom's
The
keeping
peddler's
it all
team
under
munched their
wraps.
oats in the 8 stalls,
They don't want their failure
and Master Alvear's
publicized.
massive Durans,
Better to lose
the
us
team
than
he
lose
hired
their
out when
pride.
farmers
So the
had
other
hauling
soldiers
beyond the
don't know
abilities
about
of their own horses, filled
right?
6 more.
Right.
But only 3 others
They
were
don't know
occupied.
anything about any
Rand thought he could
fugitives.
match up horse and rider with no trouble. The tall, deep-chested black stallion that swung up his head fiercely had to be
Over here.
Land's. The sleek white mare with an arched neck
Her quick steps, as graceful as a girl dancing, even in the stall, could only belong to Moraine. And the third unfamiliar horse, a rangy, slab-sided gelding of a dusty brown, fit Tom Maryland perfectly. Tam stood in the rear of the stable, holding Bella by a lead rope and speaking quietly to Hugh and Tad. Before Rand had taken 2 steps into the stable, his father nodded to the stableman and brought Bella out, wordlessly gathering up Rand as he went. They harnessed the shaggy mare in silence. Tam appeared so deep in thought that Rand held his tongue. He did not really look forward to trying to convince his father about the black-cloaked rider, much less the mayor. Tomorrow would have to be time enough, when Matt and the rest had found others who had seen the man. If they found others. As the cart lurched into motion,
Time to move.
Rand took his bow and quiver from the back, awkwardly belting the quiver at his waist as he half-trotted alongside. When they reached the last row of houses in the village, he nocked an arrow, carrying it half-raised and partly drawn. There was nothing to see except mostly leafless trees, but his shoulders tightened. The Black Rider could be on them before either of them knew it. There might not be time to draw the bow if he was not already halfway to it. He knew he could not keep up the tension on the bowstring for long. He had made the bow himself, and Tam was one of the few others in the district who could even draw it all the way to the cheek. He cast around for something to take his mind off thinking about the Dark Rider. Surrounded by the forest, their cloaks flapping in the wind, it was not easy. "Father," he said finally, "I don't understand why the council had to question Padan Fain." With an effort, he took his eyes off the woods and looked across Bella at Tam. "It seems to me the decision you reached could have been made right on the spot. The mayor frightened everybody half out of their wits, talking about eyes to die and the false flags here in the 2 rivers. People are funny, right? The best of them are.
Be ready for the next
Carl
fight.
Luhan. Master Luhan is a strong man and a brave one, but he can't bear to see butchering done. Turns pale as a sheet. What does that have to do with anything? Everybody knows Master Luhan can't stand the sight of blood, and nobody but the Coplans and the Congers thinks anything of it. Just this. People don't always think or behave the way you might believe they would. Those folk back there, let the hail beat their crops into the mud and the winds take off every roof in the district, and the wolves kill half their livestock. They'll roll up their sleeves and start from scratch. They'll grumble. They won't waste any time with it. But you give them just the thought of Aes Sedai, the false dragon in Gillidan. Soon enough, they'll start thinking that Gillidan is not that far the other side of the Forest of Shadows. And a straight line from Tar Valon to Gillidan wouldn't pass that much to the east of us. As if the Aes Sedai wouldn't take the road through Caemlyn and Lugard instead of traveling cross-country. By tomorrow morning, half the village would have been sure the entire war was about to descend on us. It would take weeks to undo. A fine Beltane that would make. So Bran gave them the idea before they could get it for themselves. They've seen the council take the problem under consideration. By now, they'll be hearing what we decided. They chose us for the village council because they trust we can reason things out in the best way for everybody. They trust our opinion. Even Sam's, which doesn't say much for the rest of us, I suppose. At any rate, they will hear there isn't anything to worry about, and they'll believe it. It is not that they couldn't reach the same conclusion, or would not eventually. But this way, we won't have festival ruin, and nobody has to spend weeks worrying about something that isn't likely to happen. If it does, against all odds, well, the patrols will give us enough warning to do what we can. I truly don't think it will come to that, though. Rand puffed out his cheeks. Apparently, being on the council was far more complicated than he had believed. The cart rumbled on along the quarry road. Did anyone besides Baron see this strange rider? Sam asked. Matt did, but... Rand blinked, then stared across Bella's back at his father. You believe me? I have to go back. I have to tell them. Tam's shout halted him as he turned to run back to the village.
Way to go.
Hold, lad. Hold. You think I waited this long to speak for no reason? Reluctantly, Rand kept on beside the cart, still creaking along behind patient Bella. What made you change your mind? Why can't I tell the others? They'll know soon enough. At least Perrin will. Matt, I'm not sure of. Word must be gotten to the farms as best it can. But in another hour, there won't be anyone in Emmonsfield above 16, those who can be responsible about it at least, who doesn't know a stranger is skulking around. Likely not the sort you would invite to festival. The winter has been bad enough without this to scare the young ones. Just a... Rand said. If you had seen him, you wouldn't want him closer than 10 miles. 100. Perhaps so.
Stay down!
Sam said lastly. He could be just a refugee from the troubles in Gillidan. More likely a thief, since the pickings will be easier here than in Beerlong, or Taran Ferry. Even so, no one around here has so much they can afford to have it stolen. If the man is trying to escape the war, well, that's still no excuse for scaring people. Once the watch is mounted, it should either find him or frighten him off. That would frighten him off. So why do you believe me now, when you didn't this morning? I had to believe my own eyes then, lad. I saw nothing. Damn, only young men see this fellow, it seems. When Harald Luhan mentioned parent jumping shadows, though, it all came out. John Thane's oldest son saw him too, and so did Samuel Craw's boy, Bandry. Well, when 4 of you say you've seen things, solid lads all. You start thinking maybe it's there, whether we can see it or not. That's a friend, of course. Anyway, that's why we're going home. Both of us away, this stranger could be up to any kind of mischief there. If not for festival, I wouldn't come back tomorrow either. So we can't make ourselves prisoners in our own home just because this fellow is lurking about.
Be ready for the next fight.
I didn't know about Banner Lem, Rand said. The rest of us were going to the mayor tomorrow. But we were worried he wouldn't believe us either. Gray hairs don't mean our brains have curdled, Tam said dryly. So you keep a sharp eye.
Gotta be stronger.
Maybe I'll catch sight of him too, if he shows up again. Rand settled down to do just that. He was surprised to realize that his step felt lighter. The knots were gone from his shoulders. He was still scared, but it was not so bad as it had been.
Wonder how the others are doing.
Tam and he were just as alone on the quarry road as they had been that morning. But in some way, he felt as if the entire village were with them. That others knew and believed made all the difference.
They'll get caught
There
eventually.
was nothing the black-cloaked horseman could do that the people of Emond's
Then they'll
Field
have to
could not
choose.
handle together.
Resist
Chapter
or
5.
surrender.
Winter Night.
Surrender.
The sun stood halfway down from its noonday high by the
Do you
time the
think
cart
he's
reached the
still alive?
farmhouse. It was not a big house, not nearly so large as some of the
You mean
sprawling
Snow?
farmhouses to the east, dwellings that had grown over the years to hold
He's too
entire
stubborn
families.
to die.
In the 2 rivers,
And
that
that's
often
his
included
best
3 or 4
quality.
generations
He's
under
arrogant
one
and
roof,
chummy from the get-go.
including aunts,
Thinks he's
uncles,
everybody's
cousins, and
pal.
nephews.
Never liked him much.
Tam and Rand were considered out of the
leads around a
ordinary
bunch
as
of
much for being
kids.
2 men living alone
Gang
as for
called
farming in the
Nora.
Westwood. Here, most of the
Where'd they
rooms
get
were
the
on
name
one
Nora?
floor, a neat rectangle with no wings or
It's
additions.
a stupid acronym.
2 bedrooms and an attic
Their little
storeroom
code
fitted up under the steeply
stands
sloped
for
thatch.
No obligations,
If the whitewash was all
rules,
but
or
gone from the stout
authority.
wooden walls
Must be
after the
nice.
winter storms, the house was still in a tidy state of repair, the
It's
thatch tightly
irresponsible.
mended, and the doors and shutters well hung and snug fitting. House, barn, and stone sheep pen formed the points of a triangle around the farmyard, where a few chickens had ventured out to scratch at the cold ground. An open shearing shed, a stone dipping trough, stood next to the sheep pen. Hard by the fields, between the farmyard and the trees, loomed the tall cone of a tight-walled curing shed. Few farmers in the 2 rivers could make do without both wool and tobacco to sell when the merchants came. When Rand took a look in the stone pen, the heavy-horned herd ram looked back at him, but most of the black-faced flock remained placidly where they lay, or stood, with their heads in the feed trough. Their coats were thick and curly, but it was still too cold for shearing. I don't think the black-cloaked man came here, Rand called to his father, who was walking slowly around the farmhouse, spear held at the ready, examining the ground intently. The sheep wouldn't be so settled if that one had been around. Tam nodded, but did not stop. When he had made a complete circuit of the house, he did the same around the barn and the sheep pen, still studying the ground.
A lot of
He
feral
even checked the
creatures in town.
smokehouse and the curing
They're
shed.
a little different from the military.
Drawing a bucket of water
This
from the
is an
well,
army
he flipped
facility
a cupped
for
hand,
turning
sniffed the
wildlife
water,
into
and
weapons.
gingerly touched it with the tip of his tongue.
Civilians aren't allowed in here.
Abruptly,
are
he
they?
barked aloud, then drank it down
We'll
in a
have to
quick
be sure
gulp.
and tell him if we see any.
I suppose he didn't, he told Rand, wiping his hand on his coat front. All this about men and horses I can't see or hear just makes me look crossways at everything. He emptied the well water into another bucket and started for the house, the bucket in one hand and his spear in the other. I'll start some stew for supper. And as long as we're here, we might as well get caught up on a few chores. Rand grimaced, regretting winter night in Emmons Field. But Tam was right. Around a farm, the work never really got done. As soon as one thing was finished, two more always needed doing. He hesitated about it, but kept his bow and quiver close at hand. The Dark Rider did appear. He had no intention of facing him with nothing but a hoe. First was stabling Bella. Once he had unharnessed her, put her into a stall in the barn next to their cow, he set his cloak aside and rubbed the mare down with handfuls of dry straw, then curried her with a pair of brushes. Climbing the narrow ladder to the loft, he pitched down hay for her feed.
It's all or nothing.
He fetched a scoopful of oats for her as well, but there was little enough left. There might be no more for a long while, unless the weather warmed. The cow had been milked that morning before first light, giving a quarter of her usual yield. She seemed to be drying up as the winter hung on. Enough feed had been left to see the sheep for 2 days. They should have been in the pasture by now, but there was none worth calling it so. Buddy topped off their water. Whatever eggs had been laid needed to be gathered too. There were only 3. The hens seemed to be getting cleverer at hiding them. He was taking a hoe to the vegetable garden behind the house when Tam came out and settled on a bench in front of the barn to mend harness, propping his spear beside him. It made Rand feel better about the bow lying on his cloak a pace from where he stood. Few weeds had pushed above ground, but more weeds than anything else. The cabbages were stunted, barely a sprout of the beans or peas showed, and there was not a sign of a beet. Not everything had been planted, of course. Only part, in hopes the cold might break in time to make a crop of some kind before the cellar was empty. It did not take long to finish hoeing, which would have suited him just fine in years past. But now he wondered what they would do if nothing came up this year. Not a pleasant thought. And there was still firewood to split. It seemed to Rand like years since there had not been firewood to split. But complaining would not keep the house warm, so he fetched the axe, propped up bow and quiver beside the chopping block, and got to work. Fine for a quick, hot flame, oak for long burning. Before long, he was warm enough to put his coat aside. When the pile of split wood grew big enough, he stacked it against the side of the house, beside other stacks already there.
Just like I
Most
planned.
reached all the way to the eaves. Usually by this time of year, the wood piles were small and few, but not this year. Chop and stack, chop and stack. He lost himself in the rhythm of the axe and the motions of stacking wood. Tam's hand on his shoulder brought him back to where he was, and for a moment he blinked in surprise. Great twilight had come on while he worked, and already it was fading quickly toward night. The full moon stood well above the treetops, shimmering pale and bulging as if about to fall on their heads. The wind had grown colder without his noticing, too. Tattered clouds scuttered across the darkling sky. Wash up, lad, and see about some supper. I've already carried in water for hot baths before soup. Anything hot sounds good to me, Rand said, snatching up his cloak and tossing it round his shoulders. Sweat soaked his shirt, and the wind, forgotten in the heat of swinging the axe, seemed to be trying to freeze it, now that he had stopped work. He stifled a yawn, shivering as he gathered the rest of his things. And sleep, too, for that. I might just sleep right through festival. Do you care to make a small wager about that? Tam smiled, and Rand had to grin back. He would not miss Beltane if he had had no sleep in a week. No one would.
Just block
Tam
out
had been
everything
extravagant
else.
with the candles, and a fire crackled in the big stone fireplace, so that the main room had a warm, cheerful feel to it. A broad oaken table was the main feature of the room, other than the fireplace. A table long enough to seat a dozen or more,
Just another
though there had
battle.
seldom been so many around it since Rand's mother died. A few cabinets and chests, most of them skillfully made by Tam himself, lined the walls, and high-backed chairs stood around the table. The cushioned chair that Tam called his reading chair sat angled before the flames. Rand preferred to do his reading stretched out on a rug in front of the fire.
Be careful.
The shelf of books by the door was not nearly as long as the one at the Wine Spring Inn, but books were hard to come by. Few peddlers carried more than a handful, and those had to be stretched out among everyone who wanted them. If the room did not look quite so freshly scrubbed as most farm wives kept their homes, Tam's pipe rack, a relevant giant bar strider, sat on the table, while another wood-bound book rested on the cushion of his reading chair. A bit of harness to be mended lay on the bench by the fireplace, and some shirts to be darned made a heap on a chair. If not quite so spotless, it was still clean and neat enough, with a lived-in look that was almost as warming and comforting as the fire. Here, it was possible to forget the chill beyond the walls. There was no false dragon here, no wars, no Aes Sedai. No men in black cloaks. The aroma from the stew pot hanging over the fire permeated the room and filled Rand with ravenous hunger. His father stirred the stew pot with a long-handled wooden spoon, then took a taste. A little while longer. Rand hurried to wash his face and hands. There was a pitcher and basin on the washstand by the door. A hot bath was what he wanted to take away the sweat and soak the chill out, but that would come when there had been time to heat the big kettle in the back room. Tam rooted around in a cabinet and came up with a key as long as his hand. He twisted it in the big iron lock on the door. At Rand's questioning look, he said, "Best to be safe. Maybe I'm taking a fancy,
like
or maybe the
animals.
weather is behind." But he sighed and bowed. "I'll see to the back door," he said, and disappeared toward the back of the house. Rand could not remember either door ever being locked. No one in the Two Rivers locked doors. There was no need. Now. From overhead, in Tam's bedroom, came a scraping as of something being dragged across the floor. Rand frowned. Unless Tam had suddenly decided to move the furniture around, he could only be pulling out the old chest he kept under his bed. Another thing that had never been done in Rand's memory. He filled a small kettle with water for tea, hung it from a hook over the fire, then set the table. He had carved the bowls and spoons himself. The front shutters had not yet been closed, and from time to time he peered out. But full night had come, and all he could see were moon shadows. The Dark Rider could be out there easily enough. He tried not to think about that. When Tam came back, Rand stared in
We've tripped the
surprise.
security alarm.
A thick belt slanted around Tam's
observation
waist,
battalion
and from
will
the
be
belt
coming.
hung a sword with a bronze heron
Let him
with a black
come.
scabbard, and another on the long hilt. The only men Rand had ever seen wearing swords were the merchant's guards. And Lan, of course. That his father might own one had never even occurred to him. Except for the herons, the sword looked a good deal like Lan's sword. "Where did that come from?" he asked. "Did you get it from a peddler? How much did it cost?" Slowly, Tam drew the weapon. Firelight played along the gleaming length. It was nothing at all like the plain, rough blades Rand had seen in the hands of merchants' guards. No gems or gold adorned it, but it seemed grand to him nonetheless. The blade, very slightly curved and sharp on only one edge, bore another heron etched into the steel. Short quillins, worked to look like a braid, flanked the hilt. It seemed almost fragile compared with the merchants' guards. Most of those were double-edged and thick enough to chop down a tree. "I got it a long time ago," Tam said. "A long way from here. I paid entirely too much. 2 coppers is too much for one of these. Your mother didn't approve, but she was always wiser than I. I was younger then, and it seemed worth the price at the time. She always wanted me to get rid of it. More than once I thought she
Take
was
5.
right, that I should just give it away." Reflected fire made the blade seem aflame. Rand started. He'd often daydreamed about owning a sword. Give it away? How could you give a sword like that away? Tam snorted. "Not much use in herding sheep now, is it? Can't
What's
plow a
eating you?
field or harvest a crop with it."
Okay, I
For a
can
long
tell you
minute,
hung
he
up on
stared at the
something.
sword as if wondering what he was doing with such a thing. At last,
Is
he
it
let out
the
a heavy
Lizzie thing?
sigh. "But if I am not just taken by a black fancy,
It's snow,
if our
isn't
luck
it?
runs sour, maybe in the next few days we'll be glad I tucked it in that old chest instead." He slid the sword smoothly back into its
What
sheath,
happened with
wiped
him?
his hand on his shirt with a grimace.
You wouldn't understand.
"The stew should be ready. I'll dish it out while you fix the tea." Rand nodded and got the tea canister. But
You
he
and
wanted
I
to
are
know everything.
partners, Hope.
Why would Tam have bought a sword? He could not imagine. And where had Tam come by it? How far away?
My
No one
mother
ever
was
left the Two
killed
Rivers, or very few at
because of
least.
him.
He had always vaguely supposed his father must have gone outside. His mother had been an outlander. But a sword? He had a lot of questions to ask once they had settled at the table. The tea water was boiling fiercely, and he had to wrap a cloth around the kettle's handle to lift it
his
off the
fault.
hook. Heat soaked through immediately. As he straightened from the fire, a heavy thump at the door rattled the lock.
And he needs to pay
All
for
thoughts
it.
of the sword, or the hot
I'm
kettle
not
in his
ready
hand,
yet.
flew away.
But I will be.
One of the neighbors, he said
Soon.
uncertainly. Master Daughtry wanting to borrow. But the Daughtry
That's why I
farm, their
followed
nearest
you.
neighbor, was an hour away, even in the daylight. And Oren Daughtry, shameless borrower that he was still not likely to
Snow
leave his
dragged
house
us all
by
into
dark.
this.
Tam
You and
softly
me?
placed the stew-filled bowls on
Your
the table.
sister Sarah?
Slowly, he moved away from the table. Both of his hands
He's
rested
gotta
on his
pay.
sword hilt. I don't think, he began. The door burst open, pieces of the iron lock spinning across the floor. A figure filled the doorway, bigger than any man
Gotta be
Rand had ever
stronger.
seen. A figure in
take the
black
lead.
mail that hung to his knees, with spikes at wrists and elbows and shoulders.
Aw.
One hand clutched a heavy, scythe-like sword. The other hand was flung up before his eyes as if to
Time to
shield them
move.
from the light. Rand felt the beginnings of an odd sort of relief. Whoever this was, it was not the black-cloaked rider. Then he saw the curled ram's horns on the head that brushed the top of the doorway,
Then you can take on
and
anything.
where the mouth and nose should have been was a hairy muzzle. He took in all of it in the space of one deep breath that he let out in a terrified yell, as, without thinking, he hurled the hot kettle at the half-human head. The creature roared, part scream of pain, part animal snarl, as boiling water splashed over its face. Even as the kettle struck, Tam's sword flashed. The roar abruptly became a gurgle, and the huge shape toppled back. Before it finished falling, another was trying to claw its way past. Rand glimpsed a misshapen head topped by spike-like horns before Tam struck again, and two huge bodies blocked the door. He realized his father was shouting at him. "Run, lad! Hide in the woods!" The bodies in the doorway jerked as others outside tried to pull them clear. Tam thrust a shoulder under the massive table. With a grunt, he heaved it over atop the tangle.
Out of my
"There are too
way!
many more! Now go back! Go! Go! I'll follow!" Even as Rand turned away, shame showed him that he obeyed so quickly. He wanted to stay and help his father, though he could not imagine how. But fear had him by the throat, and his legs moved on their own. He dashed from the room toward the back of the house, as fast as he had ever run in his life. Crashes and shouts from the front door pursued him. He had his hands on the bar across the back door when his eye fell on the iron lock that was never locked. Except that Tam had done just that tonight. Letting the bar stay where it was, he darted to a side window, flung up the sash, and threw back the shutters. Night had replaced twilight completely. The full moon and drifting clouds made dappled shadows chase one another across the farmyard. Shadows, he told himself. Only shadows.
Nothing I can't handle.
The back door creaked as someone outside, or something, tried to push it open. His mouth went dry. A crash hit the door on his frame and lent him speed. He slipped through the window like a hare going to ground and cowered against the side of the house. Inside the room, wood splintered like thunder. He forced himself up to a crouch, made himself peer inside, just with one eye, just at the corner of the window. In the dark, he could not make out much, but more than he really wanted to see. The door hung askew, and shadowed shapes moved cautiously into the room, talking in low, guttural voices. Rand understood none of what was said. The language sounded harsh, unsuited to a human tongue. Axes and spears and spike things dully reflected stray glimmers of moonlight. Boots scraped on the floor, and there was a rhythmic click, as of hooves as well. He tried to work moisture back into his mouth. Drawing a deep, ragged breath, he shouted as loudly as he could, "They're coming in the back!" The words came out in a croak, but at least they came out. He had not been sure they would. "I'm outside! Run, father!" With the last word, he was sprinting away from the farmhouse. Hoarse-voiced shouts in the strange tongue raged from the back room. Glass shattered, loud and sharp, and something thudded heavily to the ground behind him. He guessed one of them had broken through the window rather than try to squeeze through the opening. But he did not look back to see if he was right. Like a fox running from hounds, he darted into the nearest mooncast shadows, as if headed for the woods. Then dropped to his belly and slithered back to the barn and its larger, deeper shadows. Something fell across his shoulders, and he thrashed about, not sure if he was trying to fight or
Stay
escape,
down.
until he realized he was grappling with the new hoe handle Tam had been shaking. Idiot. For a moment, he lay there, trying to stop panting.
Target's a target.
At last, he crawled on along the back of the barn, dragging the hoe handle with him. It was not much, but it was better than nothing. Cautiously, he looked around the corner at the farmyard and the house. Of the creature that had jumped out after him, there was no sign. It could be anywhere. Hunting him, surely. Even creeping up on him at that very moment. Frightened bleats filled the sheep pen to his left. Flock milled as if trying to find an escape. Shattered shapes flickered in the lighted front windows of the house, and the clash of steel on steel rang through the darkness. Suddenly, one of the windows burst outward in a shower of glass and wood, as Tam leaped through it, sword still in hand. He landed on his feet, but instead of running away from the house, he dashed toward the back of it, ignoring the monstrous things scrambling after him through the broken window in the doorway. Rand stared in disbelief. Why was he not trying to get away? Then he understood. Tam at last heard his voice from the rear of the house. "Father!" he shouted. "I'm over here!" In mid-stride, Tam whirled, not running toward Rand, but at an angle away from him. "Run, lad!" he shouted, gesturing with the sword as if to someone ahead of him. "Hide!" A dozen huge forms streamed after him, harsh shouts and shrill howls shivering the air. Rand pulled back into the shadows behind the barn. There he could not be seen from the house, in case any of the creatures were still inside.